Let's build a gaming PC smaller than an Xbox Series X. Something that you can easily hide behind your monitor, be thrown into a backpack, and used in a variety of situations. It can be upgraded over the years, you have more freedom in how you use it, and those Steam sales. Now, while this is smaller than the Xbox Series X, it is still gonna be more expensive than the Xbox. Because, well, it's pretty difficult to beat that $500 price point, especially for what you get. Now, how much more expensive is going to depend entirely on what parts you choose. Now, because I'm not sticking to any particular budget in this build, I kind of just want to go all out and see how much performance we can get out of this tiny PC. Thanks to Factor for sponsoring today's video. I try to simplify my life as much as possible and automate as many decisions as I can. And one crucial area I've been able to do that is with food. See, finding ways to put your meal decisions on autopilot can help reduce day-to-day decision fatigue and help you consistently make healthier food choices. That's where this video sponsor Factor can help you, as it has me. Okay, so today for lunch, I'm gonna be eating roasted tomato and feta cavatappi with broccoli and red peppers. There are a ton of weekly options to choose from. This week I got garlic cream pork chop, beef bolognese, and jalapeno cheddar chicken. All of these meals look delicious, they arrive fresh, never frozen, and if I were making these at home, I would have a lot of extra work to do. Instead, I can have a meal ready in 2 minutes in the microwave or 10 in the oven, which is what I personally prefer. Their plans range from 4 to 18 chef-prepared meals per week, which you can easily change or skip if you need to. They have dietitian-approved options like Calorie Smart, Keto, Vegan and Veggie, or even Protein Plus if you're trying to hit those macro goals. So head on over to factor75.com or click the link below and use the code DevinJ50 to get 50% off your first Factor box and then 20% off your next box. That's code DevinJ50 at factor75.com. You get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next box while your subscription is active. Start, I'm gonna go with the fastest gaming CPU available right now, which is the Ryzen 7 7800X3D. This is a clearly overkill CPU for the build. I think most would be perfectly okay with a 7700 or even a 7600 if you're targeting higher resolutions. But this is an incredibly efficient CPU and our cooler should be able to handle it. But I guess we'll find that out later. Cores, 16 threads, and a boost up to 5 GHz, this chip really is a monster and outperforms AMD's more expensive 7950X3D in gaming performance. So we're gonna be plugging that into a personal favorite of mine, the Asus ROG Strix B650E. If you watched any of my past videos, you've probably seen this one quite a few times, but it's just a great, well-rounded board in my opinion. Nice understated aesthetics, 8 USB ports with 2 of them being Type-C, Wi-Fi 6E built in, and 2 M.2 slots. One is under the included heatsink at the front, and the other is hidden away at the back. Now, because of the sandwich style layout of this case, I would recommend populating that back slot now if you're planning to use it, as it is gonna be an effort to do it later once the whole system is built. For now though, I'm gonna be using a 2TB drive in the primary front spot. The one I have here is a 980 Pro, which you can typically find on Amazon for around $160. The 2 DIMM slots can also support up to DDR5 8000, although honestly, anything over 6,000 is wasted money on a gaming build, so I'm gonna go with exactly that. 32 gigs, DDR5 6000, CL36 kit from Crucial. Now this is their overclocking Pro Series line. They've got these really nice metal heat sinks and a super clean, stealthy look to them. They're also low enough profile to work for the build. There's also an Expo memory profile, so we can easily get those advertised speeds with one quick setting change in the BIOS. We've got 47 millimeters of clearance for our CPU cooler, and that really only leaves us with a few options if we want to maximize that available space. I picked up a few of the popular ones as I was kind of planning out the build, and after considering the options here, I ended up landing on the Thermalright AXP90 X47, but the full copper edition. It's ugly as hell, and it's a little more expensive than the aluminum versions, but the pure copper heat pipes should give us the best thermal performance. I haven't used this cooler myself yet, so I guess we'll find out how it holds up. But I'm not gonna stand for this orange fan, so I'll be swapping that out with a black one. Installation is quite straightforward as well. We can just swap out these Intel brackets with the ones that fit AMD boards, remove the default mounts from the motherboard, apply some thermal paste, and then place that cooler over our CPU. The standoff should go right through the backplate, and once we flip our board over, we can use the AM4 side of the included backplate, which still works with this AM5 board. Then once we tighten our cooler with the 4 nuts, we can just plug in the CPU fan and our motherboard is ready to be moved into the case. So the case here is the Velka 7 from Velcase. This is my 3rd Velka build on the channel. I built a 4060 PC in the Velka 3 and then a 4070 PC in the Velka 5. Now this one is the largest of the lineup as the name implies, and It's the only of the three that can actually fit an SFX power supply along with that larger CPU cooler clearance. So let's remove this from the packaging and open it up. We have quite a few screws to remove so that we can get into this case. First, there's 2 on the top and the bottom to remove so that we can pull up that front faceplate. And just with this piece alone, you can really feel how high the build quality of this case is. It's a very thick, solid piece of steel with absolutely no flex to it. Now to get the side panels off, we have 2 screws for each on the back, and then another 2 at the front under where we just removed that faceplate. Side panels are surprisingly rigid as well, especially considering the amount of hole punching in them. No flex on them, really solid pieces of steel here. I wouldn't be worried about throwing something like this into my backpack. Next, we need to remove the 2 side panels, and then the last thing to do is get out the motherboard tray. So there's 1 screw on the side and then another 2 on the back. And look, we've removed a lot of pieces at this point. I would try to keep the screws with their corresponding pieces so that we can easily keep track of them later on when it's time to put everything back together. Okay, now we are finally ready to start installing our components. So starting with the motherboard, we can secure that to the tray and plug in the riser cable. Flipping it over to the other side, we also need to remove these 3 pre-installed brackets. So let's put those aside, and then we need to route the riser cable at an angle to these mounting points. There's 2 positions here. I'm going to be going with the one furthest from the edge. That way it can allow enough room for an internal display extension cable. So we need to use the spacers along with some long screws and secure that down. The piece that we secured the riser cable to can also be shifted. If you shift that and use these included standoffs, you can create a little bit more room for your display inputs if you were to need it. All right, now we can resecure all of those brackets. So let's resecure the bar piece that goes right over the riser cable. Then let's grab the GPU bracket and attach it as well so that we can install our GPU. This is where we'll be installing our Founders Edition RTX 4070 Super. So we're only able to fit a 2-slot GPU in here. Cards like the Asus Dual 4070 Super aren't gonna fit. That one, an example, is 2.5 slots. There are a few options if you want or can't get a Founders card. Velcase does have a compatibility list on their website that can help, so I'll link that in the description if you want to take a look. Blow-through style coolers aren't usually ideal in a sandwich style layout like this one, but I've actually found that the temps of the Founders 4070 to be better than the PNY 4070 I did in my Velcome 5 video a few months back. And temps are looking great in this build with the Super as well. Under 70 degrees Celsius after an hour of playing Horizon Forbidden West at 1440p. Performance is looking good as well at over 100 frames per second using the high preset with DLSS quality. Cyberpunk 2077 looks really good as well, using the Ray Tracing Ultra preset and still getting over 90 frames per second running around Night City. And GPU temps in this game are still sticking around that 70 degree mark, pulling around 200 watts. If we want to push this further, we can pull that full 220 watts using the furry butthole test for 10 minutes. And we're still maxing out at only 75 degrees Celsius. The 4070 Super is probably best paired with a 1440p high refresh rate monitor, but I wouldn't be disappointed hooking this up to a 4K display, especially if you plan to utilize things like DLSS and frame generation. Now let's take our GPU and install it into our PCI Express riser cable. From there, we can secure the GPU with that last angled piece that we removed earlier at the top. And then there's one more piece that we can secure at the bottom with a single screw. And last here is I'm gonna plug in this internal display extension cable that I picked up from Amazon. I'll have it linked if you're interested in using one. It really does clean up the build quite a bit, and there are dedicated holes on the back of the case for up to 4 of them. All right, so that's the hardest part complete. Now it's time to actually start putting it all back together. Now, something I really like about the Velka 7 over the 3 and the 5 is that it can use a standard SFX or SFXL power supply. This makes it so much easier to find quality and quiet power supplies. So I'm gonna be going with the gold standard here, the SF750. I've talked about this power supply in what feels like every single video at this point, and that's because it's easily my favorite, and it's just one of the best that you can get right now. So first I'm gonna install the 24-pin motherboard, CPU, and the GPU power cables. Then we can just slide the whole thing right into the case with no problems and secure it from the back. Now we can connect our 3 power cables to the board and the GPU, then put our case back together. Now let's also not forget to plug in the power button to the front panel connectors. And that's the build complete. So not the simplest build process, and you really have to keep track of all the pieces and screws as you take the whole thing apart. But the end result is pretty worth it in my opinion. There just really isn't a lot of cases out there quite like the Velkas. Incredible build quality. I would be perfectly comfortable with my parts in here, knowing that they wouldn't get damaged if you need to move this thing around frequently, and that extra CPU cooler clearance really pays off in the 7. Having the ability to use a 47mm cooler can really open up more CPU options in your tiny build. The full copper X47 is pretty impressive actually. The 7800X3D is already a power efficient CPU, but still 65 degrees Celsius in game is very comfortable. And I'm just using an out of the box standard fan profile that comes with the Asus Armory software here. After a 10-minute multi-core stress test in Cinebench, we're still only maxing out at 81 degrees Celsius. So I'm quite happy with this little cooler. System noise when using a standard fan profile is quite low as well, 42 decibels, which is honestly unnoticeable in my opinion, and without any noticeable turbulence. Now with that said, if you do manually set the fans to full speed, it is obviously going to be much more audible at 45 decibels. But worse is the pitch due to the turbulence. Now, I really haven't had the need to run that fan at full speed. The cooler seems more than adequate, keeping temps low without going to those higher fan speeds at the standard preset. So overall, I think this is pretty impressive for such a small package. I've been using it with a portable monitor that I've attached with a magnetic mount. So the back of this Asus monitor has a threaded hole that can work with a lot of different camera and lighting equipment. I'm using this one that came with one of my lights. It has a rubber protector over the magnet so that it also keeps it from scratching up the case. From there, I can attach it to wherever really. It's surprisingly strong. Now, I've done a bit of researching, and from my understanding, there shouldn't be any risk to damaging the components inside the case when you're using a magnet on the outside like this. Now, I would still exercise some common sense here. Try not to block any fans or place it anywhere that might interfere with something. I place mine at the top corner, and it makes for a pretty comfortable ergonomic position. A surprisingly good experience here. From there, you can connect it with a short USB-C to DisplayPort cable or micro HDMI, then power it with a short USB-C cable if the battery in the monitor is drained. So this isn't the smallest 4070 build I've done. If you don't mind using a smaller CPU cooler and going with a Flex ATX power supply instead, you could also check out my Velco 5 video I did. Thanks for watching.